Welcome to our Google Plus Sensible Politics Community Hangout on Education and Gun Safety with our special guest, Delaware Governor Jack Markell. My name is Richard Socarides, and I'm going to be moderating today's discussion. Before we get started, I'd like to say thank you and give a big welcome to our panelists from Sensible Politics, who I will be introducing individually in a moment. First, a couple words about Governor Markell. The governor is not only governor of Delaware, but is the chair of the National Governors Association. And the governor has made education certainly a top priority for Delaware and has worked a lot on the issue nationally, and also is hard at work on gun safety issues in Delaware. Governor Markell, thank you. Welcome. Thanks for being part of our Hangout.
Thank you, Richard. Great to see you.
Good to see you again. The governor and I are on CNN sometimes together.
Exactly.
Let me ask you before we get started. The panel is going to talk to you, but before we get started, tell me, have you ever done one of these? Have you ever done a Google Hangout?
I did a Google Hangout, but I haven't done a Google Hangout with a distinguished panel like this before.
The way this is going to work is I'm going to introduce each of our panelists, and then they are going to pose a question or a topic to you. After everybody's had an opportunity to pose a question, we'll go back around and we'll have a little bit more of a discussion. So again, welcome to our panel. Let me introduce them, and we're going to start with the first question from Luke Mulvey. Luke is the founder of Sensible Politics, so you want to be very nice to him. And he is an advocate for LGBT rights, among other things. Luke?
Governor, welcome. Thank you for being here today. I wanted to ask you a question about referring to education. As you know, teacher evaluation is a big issue. And I wanted to know if you thought it was fair that teachers in underprivileged schools are evaluated in the same way as teachers from more affluent areas, being that they just would not have the same resources. And also, what would you do to rectify this disparity?
Okay, so great question. And we've actually spent a lot of time thinking about this issue. And the way we have addressed it, I think it is fair, because what we're doing is we're really focused on measuring the growth that students achieve. In terms of addressing the disparity, look, I mean, this is one of the big challenges facing American education, and it's not just about education. It's about poverty. It's about what kind of neighborhoods people live in. It's about the support. So, for example, this year in my budget, even in a tough budget year, we're recommending increases in after-school programming for kids, particularly those kids who don't have other opportunities. We're recommending a significant increase in mental health services, especially at the middle school level. And we're just, really focused on narrowing the achievement gap by doing so in a way that everybody's increasing.
So our next question is from Dan Spina. Dan is a teacher from Kansas, and he is the moderator of Sensible Politics in Kansas.
Right.
Dan?
My question would be, should colleges be focusing on better preparedness by having more difficult and challenging courses, thus better preparing the teachers for running a 21st century classroom?
The answer is yes, and I mean, there's no question that the teachers need to be prepared with the substantive knowledge to teach the various subjects, but there's also the pedagogy piece, and how effective are they in front of the classroom. And we've seen, for sure, I mean, when you look at alternate pathways into teaching, sometimes people who come in from industry are extraordinarily effective, and it's great to have people with that kind of subject matter knowledge, but sometimes not. We need to make sure that they're effective in the classroom as well.
Our next question comes from Ole Olson. Ole is an internet activist and an advisor to Democrats in Minnesota, and is the moderator of Sensible Politics Minnesota. Ole?
With the looming cuts that are coming with the sequestration, are there any steps that states can take individually to try to take the bite out of what's going to happen to Head Start and other early education programs?
We are huge believers in high quality early education, not just any early education or early child care, but high quality. It makes a very significant difference. And I look at this really two ways. I mean, one is from the research perspective, there's very good research out of the Federal Reserve Bank in Minnesota that says the most effective economic development investment that a state can make is in high-quality early childhood education. The second piece is if you've ever met a 5-year-old who is already a year or two behind their peers or who already has a deficit in their vocabulary of a couple thousand words because they haven't been raised in a nurturing environment, I mean, it's a tragedy every single time. And so what we are doing in Delaware, we decided 2 years ago to make a significant investment. And we're going to increase over the next 5 years from 20 to 80 the percentage of high-need kids in our state who are enrolled in a quality preschool program. And we think this is a game changer. And with respect to the sequester, there's a lot of uncertainty still. And, many states are not really going to be in a position to absorb some of the cuts that are coming down the pike. And I think, on this one and others, we're going to have to try to figure out a way. But it comes at a tough time. One, because state budgets are so challenged to deal with those kinds of cuts. And secondly, at a time when we're working so hard to put people back to work, the idea that this creates additional uncertainty in the business community and it makes it less likely that businesses will invest and hire make it especially painful. So I think
okay, I'm going to, with everyone's permission, I'm going to switch the focus a little bit to gun safety issues because I know that in your recent State of the State address, Governor, you outlined a number of legislative proposals that you're hoping to get through, and which really, in some ways, I think could serve for models of in other parts of the country. So, can you tell us? I think you had as many as 5 separate pieces of legislation that you proposed.
Yes. All right. So let me lay those out. Let me tell you first. We actually 2 years ago, we were probably the only state in the country to address this issue, and I proposed at that time 4 bills. 3 of them got through, 1 did not. Let me also say that this gun safety legislation also needs to be understood in the context of some other changes we're making. One of them around mental health, I mentioned briefly earlier, but I'll mention it again, that I proposed in my budget a 10-fold increase in the number of behavioral health consultants in our middle schools, from 3 to 30, because we've identified a real gap there. Secondly, a couple years ago, we made a real move on the school safety proposals, making sure that every school has a high-quality school safety plan, and that's work that we are accelerating. So there are really 3 legs of the stool: mental health, school safety, and our gun safety, what we believe to be common sense gun safety legislations, bills. Those bills are universal background checks, limit on high-capacity magazines, limit on assault weapons, making sure that people who have lost or had a weapon or had one stolen, once they realize it, have 48 hours to report that. And then the last one is a limitation about how close guns can be to schools. The Attorney General's office is working on that one with appropriate caveats. I will say this, let me make this point really clear. None of these in any way violate the Second Amendment. We believe in the Second Amendment. I do personally. I know that our Lieutenant Governor and our Attorney General, who joined with me in putting these proposals forward, agree with that. There's nothing about confiscation, nothing about taking anybody's guns away from them, and we believe that these are common sense pieces of legislation, and we're going to work hard to try to get them through. But I will tell you that people who are opposed to them immediately go to this issue of, this is a violation of the Second Amendment, you're trying to take my guns away. It's just not true, and nobody should believe it just because the other side.
I want to say thank you to everybody. Maybe I'll ask one more question. When was the last person from Delaware elected president of the United States?
I don't think there has been, but perhaps that'll be Joe Biden in 2016.
Perhaps it could be Joe Biden if he decided to run, or perhaps it could be someone else.
I think Joe Biden would be a great choice.
Well, listen, we really, the Sensible Politics community at Google Plus really appreciates your time today, Governor. And you're been very generous with us and very accessible. And we look forward to doing this again. Thank you for your thoughtful answers. Thanks to all the panelists, and thanks for everybody on Google Plus for joining us.
Thanks a lot. Take care.
Thank you, Governor.
Thank you,
Bye-bye,
Governor.
everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Governor.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.